Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating topic: how plants reproduce. We're going to break down the mechanics behind one of nature's most beautiful, yet incredibly functional processes. To kick things off, I want you to think about this for a second. Why are flowers the most attractive part of a plant? A lot of times, we just assume their dazzling colors and gorgeous shapes are, for our enjoyment. But the truth is, a flower's beauty isn't for us at all. It actually serves as a brilliant evolutionary survival mechanism, perfectly engineered to ensure the continuation of the species. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the anatomy of attraction, then look at complete and incomplete flowers, the process of pollination, self versus cross-pollination, fertilization from flower to fruit, and finally, the global pollinator crisis. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The anatomy of attraction. To really grasp how plants reproduce, we first have to understand the underlying structure. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. A standard flower consists of 4 main parts, or whorls, and all of these parts are attached to a swollen base called the thalamus, which sits on a stalk called a pedicel. Let's break down these 4 distinct whorls one by one to see how they each pull their weight for the ultimate goal of reproduction. Starting from the very outside, we have the first layer, called the calyx. This is made up of those green, leaf-like structures you've probably seen, known as sepals. Think of the calyx as the flower's personal shield. Before a flower even blooms, the sepals wrap right around it, protecting the delicate bud while it's developing, and they even help prepare food for the plant. Just inside that protective shield is the second whorl, the corolla. Now, this is the part we usually notice first because it's made up of a ring of modified leaves that we call petals. And this right here answers our initial hook about why flowers are so flashy. Petals come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, and colors, often with an amazing fragrance. The corolla is literally a stage built to attract external agents, like insects, to come in and help with pollination. Moving deeper into the center, we hit the andrecium. This is the male reproductive unit of the flower, which is basically a collection of stamens. Each individual stamen has a long, narrow stalk called a filament, and perched right at the top of that filament is a bilobe structure known as the anther. This is super important because it's the crucial manufacturing hub where the vital pollen grains, which contain the male reproductive cells, are actually produced. Finally, right in the innermost core of the flower, we have the fourth whorl, the gynoecium. This is the female reproductive counterpart, made up of pistils or carpels. It's got 3 distinct parts. At the very top is the stigma, and it's wonderfully sticky so it can easily catch incoming pollen. Below that is a long tube-like structure called the style, which connects all the way down to the ovary. The ovary is the swollen base that holds tiny egg-like structures known as ovules. Moving on to Section 2, complete and incomplete flowers. Now, you might be wondering, do all flowers have that exact same anatomical lineup? Actually, no. Based on their reproductive parts, flowers are generally classified into 2 main types. Bisexual flowers have both the male stamen and the female pistil right there in the same flower. Because they have all 4 whorls, they're called complete flowers. Think of a rose, a sweet pea, or a sunflower. On the flip side, monosexual flowers have either the male part or the female part. Since they're lacking one of these crucial components, we call them incomplete flowers. Some great examples here are cucumber, papaya, or pumpkin flowers. Section 3. The process of pollination. So here's the thing. Plants are rooted in the ground, right? They literally can't just walk over to a mate. Because of that, they absolutely rely on a dynamic delivery system to move their pollen around. When mature anthers burst open and release those pollen grains, they need help getting to the stigma. So plants use a variety of external agents. Butterflies and bees might come by to collect nectar, and they accidentally pick up that sticky pollen on their bodies, transferring it to the next flower they visit. But it's not just bugs. Small birds, flowing water, and even the wind act as critical natural carriers in this huge, remarkable transportation network. Which brings us to Section 4, self versus cross-pollination. So how exactly does this transfer play out? Well, the difference really comes down to the final destination of the pollen. In self-pollination, pollen from an anther lands on the stigma of that exact same flower, or another flower on the exact same plant. This only happens in those complete bisexual flowers we talked about, and usually it doesn't even need an external agent. Cross-pollination, however, is when pollen transfers from one flower to a completely different plant of the same type. And this method absolutely relies on those external environmental or animal agents we just mentioned to make the jump. And speaking of environmental agents like the wind, Check out this absolutely astounding fact from our sources. Pine trees, which rely heavily on the wind for cross-pollination, produce such massive, incredible quantities of pollen that when it gets carried away by a strong breeze, it creates a highly visible yellow cloud in the air. This natural phenomena is literally referred to as a sulfur shower. Pretty wild, right? All right, section 5, fertilization from flower to fruit. Now, pollination is really just the delivery service. The true climax of this whole biological process happens internally. Let's walk through this sequence step by step. First, the pollen grain successfully lands on that sticky stigma at the top of the gynecium. Next, the male reproductive cells travel all the way down through that long tube called the style, journeying right into the ovary. Once they're there, the real magic happens. The male cell fuses with the female cell inside the ovule. This exact fusion is what we call fertilization. After this takes place, the ovules change into seeds, and the surrounding ovary actually swells up, transforming into the very fruits that we eat. Section 6, the global pollinator crisis. It's a beautifully intricate system, but if we zoom out from the microscopic mechanics for a second, we see it's also a system under major threat. Our sources note that most flowering plant species, and most of our food crops, by the way, rely on these pollinating agents. Without them, we wouldn't just lose apples or tomatoes. Consider this quote from the text. Dairy cows eat alfalfa, seeds of which are spread by honeybees. Think about that cascade. Without bees, the alfalfa doesn't reproduce. The cows lose a major food source, and suddenly, everyday items like milk, cheese, and ice cream are threatened. We are so deeply connected to this web. Yet, the population of these crucial pollinating agents is shrinking year after year. According to the source material, these animals are basically vital allies to farmers, but several human-driven practices are actively threatening their food sources and habitats. We're seeing urbanization paving right over natural environments. The widespread use of insecticides and herbicides is heavily knocking down their numbers. On top of that, climate change is altering the availability of their shelter and food. We are severely disrupting the delicate agents that make cross-pollination possible in the first place. So, the big takeaway here is that this intricate system is highly specific and so delicately balanced. To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question straight from our sources. What happens if pollen grains of a rose get deposited on the stigma of a lily flower? Think about it. Does fertilization take place? The answer is no, absolutely not. Fertilization will fail because it only works when the male and female cells belong to the exact same species. It is a perfect reminder of how brilliantly specialized yet incredibly fragile the natural mechanics of plant reproduction truly are. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring